Recent declaration of state of emergency on food security by President Bola Tinubu's administration is the most welcome decision by all and the first step in the right direction. It is the only basis on which a lot of thinking and policies have to be put in place and implemented in order to bridge the yearning gap of food security, insecurity in the country. China, India, and United States, as the largest food-producing countries in the world, have many years ago already put in place best practices in agriculture and food production. All that the country needs to do is learn from these countries and make minor adjustments to suit their local environment. These countries have achieved food sufficiency through various policies, programs, and strategies. With me on the show today is a researcher and agribusiness economist, Dr. Mathew, to suggest policies to help end the challenge of food insecurity in Nigeria. Thank you so much. It's good to have you join us from the United Kingdom.
Good afternoon, Tolu. Thanks for having me.
Great. We can hear you and see you now. Well, let's get talking because there's a lot of work that needs to be done and time is already well spent. The president came up to say a state of emergency on the agricultural space, on food security, rollout of grains and all of that. Now we have a minister that should consolidate from where the president stopped. How do you understand all of these moves and when do we start to see the expected impact?
Thanks once again. If you remember when that speech came out and when the declaration on the food emergency was issued, I did say that I'm not the type that is moved easily by what is spoken or what words that are spoken, but want to see action. So having gotten a minister now of agriculture, this is the time to prove what has been spoken. This is the time to carry out the actions that will really show that we want to do something concerning our food situation in Nigeria. So it's important for us to understand that people have gone beyond what we want them to hear to the point where they want to see what is to be done based on what we know has been said. So it's really time for action, like you mentioned. And in your introduction, you mentioned countries like India, China, and some others that have been able to surmount the challenge of food insecurity. It's important to also note that there are dynamics that plays out in Nigeria, which you don't have in some of these countries. So if the earlier we're able to surmount those intricacies and those little challenges that stops us from having achieving our goals in terms of food security in Nigeria, the better for us. Policies, I've always said, is not the challenge with Nigeria. But when it comes to implementation, that is where we have issues. And I think that is where this particular or this present minister can act differently.
Now, policy issues. Let's stay on policy issues so that we make do of our time. What sort of policies are we supposed to be looking at now? Insecurity is still in one corner that farmers have to grapple with. Then we now talk about getting the market right. Storage issues. We have issues around facility, infrastructure, and all of that. So which comes first in your terms?
Well, in terms of national policy, I think we already have a policy, the one that is called NATI, is the National Agricultural Technology and Innovation Policy, and that is supposed to run from 2022 to 2027. The last one was the National Agricultural Promotion Policy, the one we normally refer to as APP. So what I think the current minister can do is to do something differently. You see, I always mention this, Tolu, because you can't build on a faulty structure, all right? Now, the question that should be raging in the mind of the minister should be, what do I need to do differently from others to ensure that Nigeria becomes food secure in the next 4 years? All right? That is the question I think should be burning in the mind of the minister if he really wants to do something differently. And why I say that is, you see, agriculture is not on the exclusive list, it's on the concurrent list. And in that sense, when we have a national policy to develop agriculture, it's not something that can be achieved by sitting in Abuja, all right? So this is where I think the minister can start, putting things differently. When you look at the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and most state ministers of agriculture, there is a disconnect, Tolu. And there's a huge disconnect from what we've seen on ground. And I'm saying this based on experience, not just assumption. And if the minister wants to make headway in terms of ensuring that the national policy yields its intended goals or fruits, then this is the time to start working with the state commissioners of agriculture. Now, in doing that, the minister can do something like, we have an emergency. We need to feed ourselves as a nation. And I don't think there are federal farms where food is produced. If there are federal farms, they are most likely research farms. So foods are inherently produced in states. Can each state commissioner come up with their own food security plan or food sufficiency plan for their states? And the minister can sit down and start working with them. Then they can have a national forum where they can look at things that affect each state and how they can support, how they can monitor. And then we can start thinking of how to build on that. For now, if you look at most states where you have Federal Ministry of Agriculture located, offices located, and you have a state director, it's like everybody's working separately, okay? And in some cases, you see the director acting as superior to whoever is in the state ministry. I don't think that has helped us over the years. So if the minister intends to achieve anything in the next 4 years, there's something that he needs to do concerning this current structure. And it is that to bring out that, how I put it, the culture of collaborating effectively with the state commissioners of agriculture, whereby the state's plan to ensure that there's food security in their own state is constantly monitored alongside with the respective governors. Because if indeed we want to change the situations, situation we're in, we cannot continue to do the same old thing or things we have been doing. So for me, there's something for the minister to do as it concerns the structure, collaboration with the state ministers or commissioners rather of agriculture, the governors, because those who are hungry, Nigerians, they are in states, all right? They have states and the farms are in states. So we cannot continue working like this, where you have the federal standing aloof and the state standing aloof, and then we keep on saying we have national policies that in itself is not national when it comes to implementation. So for me, that is key. Number two, I think I mentioned it before. Currently, people are hungry. There's noise everywhere. People are agitated. One thing that the minister needs to look at is, how can I quickly address an issue that will have a ripple effect on the cost or the price at which people purchase food in Nigeria? And that's why I think he can work in the area of food transportation. I'm just speaking there. I have 4 that I've listed. Food transportation. We keep on talking about conversion of vehicles from petrol to gas and all that. Can we work with those who transport food in Nigeria? Can we do something for them, convert theirs maybe at a cheaper price or free, at least for now, so that they can transport food without necessarily adding extra costs because of fuel price? That's a question. So the Minister of Agriculture needs to collaborate with the Minister of Transportation. And these ones also need to look at other people or ministers to collaborate with to ensure that food transportation is done at the barest minimum, such that the price of food doesn't keep on escalating whenever there's a problem with fuel price. Now, the minister also needs to think of how to leverage, or first build and then leverage on data. Because usually, if you don't have a full information about the problem, you might not be able to solve it effectively. And it keeps on haunting us as a country. No data that is that reliable when it comes to decision making that you want to see long lasting on people. So let me just stop at those 3 first. But the first thing I think he should do is look at the current structure. It's not been working. It's not giving us what we want. How can he tweak it? How can he rejig it? What does he need to bring into play to ensure that there's effective monitoring and then also collaboration to make Nigeria food sufficient?
Interesting stuff. Let's now talk about expected interventions and what do you think they should be channeled to? Issues around flooding is also there, Doc, that we should be talking about. But let's talk about interventions, expected interventions, World Bank, AFDB, and all of that. What do you think should be the focus of all of this?
Yeah, interventions will become meaningful when you know exactly where to target. All right. You see, when we just have this head knowledge of intervention, that's why you see projects come, money are spent. I know they spent money and we don't get what we need in essence. Let me ask you, for how many years have we been having foreign interventions in Nigerian issues, especially when it comes to agriculture? And I've asked myself, to what extent has that contributed to growth or development? So because there's a lack or there's an issue with data, we need to first look at that. I've raised it before here. We can come, the minister can, as he wants, he may bring in, okay, respective, maybe data scientists, let them help model the food production and food map of the country. And then you can bring in these disasters that you've just mentioned, insecurity, you can bring in flooding as a case, and see if this happens, how do we get ourselves out of it? What are the interventions that can quickly be brought into play to save the food production status of the country? We hardly have such things in our country. Someone just sits and thinks, we need money. We need money. Since we've been small, we need money. And when the money comes, it goes into corrupt pockets and it vanishes. All right? Those who are affected by this are not even, they don't get succor. Now, you have around 38 million, or FAO says 34.5 million farmers in Nigeria. All right? That's about 70% of your labor force, about 20% or thereabout of the population. Now, if there's flooding, these people will be affected, not just their livelihood, but also the ability to produce food for us as a nation. So that is a critical area that needs to be attended to. But because of the kind of country we are in, and I've worked in the area of flood issues as it concerns farming, these farmers are usually left to themselves. No support and no protection for them. So these are the things we are talking about. We can't be talking about food production when the forces or those who produce food are left to fend for themselves and face the risk on their own. It's not enough to take farmers to move to higher lands or higher grounds because flood is coming. What will you do when they move? How do they feed? How do they produce? So these are the things I think we need to sit down. The minister needs to really sit down and look at it. If not, we'll just end up having another honorable minister, and the actions that we have are not honorable. Nothing honorable about actions that are produced, and this must stop. And so my appeal to him is this. He needs to think of what can he do differently from those who have been in that position before him to ensure that in the next 4 years, Nigeria is food sufficient. There are many intellectuals in the country and many specialists or professionals he can bring together to help him achieve this goal.
Dr. Mathew Ojo, it's always interesting having you on the show. Researcher, agribusiness economist, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tony.